Hi, my name is Emily Eckstein, and I'm a marriage and family registered intern in the state of California. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about treating the unique stressors facing same-sex couples using a narrative stress model. In order to do effective and appropriate clinical intervention with a particular population, as competent therapists, we must garner a broader understanding of the unique attributes held by that population. When working with same-sex couples, it is imperative that as clinicians, we're sensitive as not to utilize traditional family stress models in treating this marginalized population. Same-sex couples are faced with unique stressors which must be validated by and equated into the therapy process. In understanding the biological and physiological formation of stress in the individual, it is easier to then appreciate the effects of the chronic stressors facing the same-sex couple population. In order to define what stress is, we're going to look at both the general adaptation syndrome as well as the transactional stress approach. In Seeley's general adaptation syndrome, the bodily reaction to stress is explained via three phases: the alarm phase, the resistance phase, and the exhaustion phase. In the alarm phase, the body begins to physically react as seen through physiological markers. That's going to be when our clients report sweating, rapid heartbeat, shaking of the body. And these are used in order to cope with increased stressors. If these stressors persist and the body is unable to kind of return to that state of homeostasis, then the individual progresses onto the resistance phase. Here is when we see the body produce higher levels of stress hormones. And then finally, if the individual is still unable to ward off the effects of the particular stressors or stressor, the exhaustion phase is then reached. And here we see the body begin to decompose. These are going to come about, this stage is going to come about, we're going to see physical pain as well as illness presented in our clients. And then also looking at this through a systemic lens, this is also where we're going to begin to see intra and interpersonal discomfort being reported in session. Taking a step beyond simply the biological factors of stress, the transactional stress approach allows for a more individual experience of stress, which focuses on the unique factors of interaction with one's environment. And here, Lazarus and Folkman suggest that the evaluation of stress is a subjective experience held by the individual and is thereby impacted by numerous situational factors. And these can be, the person's present coping abilities as well as the state-oriented measured threat and level of fear at that time. Chronic stress, it's a common problem present across the research and literature pertaining to LGBT individuals, and therefore is a topic that really needs special attention. Chronic stress can be linked to increased cases of self-reported depression and anxiety in our LGBT clients, and even among younger generations of LGBT individuals, with a staggering 6 to 13% of LGBT youth attempting suicide last year. And again, chronic stress often emerges from social conditions such as sexism, heterosexism, and oppression, and those will be talked about later. And then systemically speaking, chronic stressors can transpire across numerous systems, of course within the family of origin, but also as well in the society as a whole, as well as the subcultures. So that can be, ethnic subcultures as well as LGBT subcultures. So what are the unique stressors facing our LGBT same-sex couples that present to us in session? So kind of the three main stressors that can be pulled out of all the literature right now present on this topic would be homophobia and heterosexism, as well as the differing stages of coming out. And this is when we have partners that have a kind of opposing stages. One maybe is more open at work, while the other isn't open at work or isn't open to classmates. This could also be differing in terms of openness towards one's family, if they're open to their family or not. And then finally, family support. And this is a huge one because, of course, we know with support comes higher levels of resiliency, and that is also going to affect the couplehood. So what are the strengths of utilizing a narrative approach to treat stress? So narrative therapy carries a social constructivist worldview in which it's thought that the many truths that an individual comes to believe are constructed through family, culture, and society. So first of all, this allows us, when using narrative therapy, to encourage a systemic approach when working with our clients. And in narrative therapy, human behaviors and stressors are believed to be maintained by the maladaptive oppressive narratives. And these are going to be the narratives that we're working to dispel when creating our new narratives. And in narrative therapy, the clinician's view and role within the room is going to be one of co-creator and not directive. So although there are some directive interventions used within this therapy modality, really the role of the clinician is more of co-creator, working side by side to assist the client. And finally, narrative therapy really encourages a positive self-image. And this is done by really normalizing the marginalized experience. There is no wrong. What is truth is what the client's experiences have been and what they continue to be. So in the first stage of the narrative stress model, we're going to go through a really thorough assessment. And there's going to be 3 parts to this assessment. First, a thorough background assessment. And here we're going to get individual background information from childhood to present. Of course, this is going to include, like any assessment we do clinically, traumas, development issues, creation of the family system, all parties involved. Next, we're going to get a clear understanding of where each individual is in the coming out process. And again, this is going to go back to what we already talked about. And that's really the differences that can exist between partners in terms of where they are in the coming out process. And this is going to be essential in later steps and stages. And finally, we're going to want to do an assessment for the level of social support held by the couple. And again, as touched on previously, this is going to be key in future steps as well as later on in the assessment process. The interventions used during the stage 1 of this model are going to be joining, and this is the classic joining, making our clients feel safe in the room, making them feel like this is a productive and nurturing environment. And of course, next, we want to create a clear understanding of the stressors. And that happens from hearing both partners' view of how they experience that. And narrative therapy really appreciates that and nurtures that expression in each individual within the session. Another intervention used during the assessment period is taking a supportive stance, and that's going to be done by the therapist. Through whatever their maladaptive narrative is at this point, which is really going to be what they're going to be expressing to you during this assessment stage, we want to take as much of a supportive stance as possible, being able to sit with what is put in the room. And finally, really one of the most effective interventions to the stress model is going to be expanding social support through group therapy. This would be an excellent time to encourage your clients to really seek out additional social support. And I suggest sending them or you making the call to your local LGBT center to see what therapy and support groups are available and giving those resources to your client. In stage 2 of the narrative stress model, we're going to start extracting unique outcomes. And in this stage, we're going to begin by identifying times when the stressors did not exist for the partners. This would, sometimes this presents prior to the relationship. It presents at the beginning of the relationships. It may even present last week. Something may have changed drastically. But the key here is identifying times when these did not exist, and even other factors around those times. What was the season? Who else was present? What were the dynamics within the family? And then next, we're going to begin to free up space by identifying those times when the stressor didn't exist. And we're going to free up space in order that the couple is able to begin to see alternative narratives, to begin to see that, hey, we don't have to be in this present moment as we are right now. And this also is a very freeing stage, and it allows for the couple to claim differences. And this is essential when dealing with this kind of marginalized population. By claiming differences, the couple's able to say, hey, we are different than maybe our heterosexual counterparts, and that's okay. And again, the interventions used during this stage are the deconstructive questions, the active externalization. In stage 3 of the narrative stress model, we're going to externalize and create the new adaptive narrative. And here there's a focus on externalizing the maladaptive narrative held by the same-sex couple and working towards a new couple's narrative. And this is going to be a new narrative void of all those old beliefs, void of all those old stressors, the heterosexism, the sexism, those societal held views. And through externalization and highlighting the already uncovered unique outcomes, we are then able to utilize and create a new dialogue. And during stage 3, the interventions that we're going to primarily utilize are going to be the information-seeking questions. Again, making sure we really understand not only what the old facts were, but what these new facts are going to look like. As well as we're going to continue to externalize all that energy and all those facts and beliefs about ourselves that our clients no longer need. Finally, in the 4th stage of the narrative stress model, we're going to reinforce what our clients have learned, reinforce their new adaptive narrative through a connection with the community. And when we say community, we really want to connect these same-sex couples with the LGBT community, with like-minded individuals and families that they can begin to relate and normalize their experience with. So again, during this stage, we're going to increase the couple's social support within the LGBT community. And as well, we're going to, as clinicians, continue to reinforce this in session. But going back to increasing the couple's social support within the LGBT community, this would be done often in terms of community meetings and outings with the community. Again, sending them to the community center where they start to make connections with other people. And through this is really reinforcing their new narrative. This can also be done through the clinician using progress letters. And that's going to be when we write letters to our clients stating the changes we see, really reinforcing the facts of their new narrative and how much we believe their new narrative is bringing to their life. Again, this can also look like letters of prediction as well as family certificates saying, hey, you did it. You created your new workable narrative. And really the fact that we as, your treatment team, we as your clinician appreciate the movement you've made towards strengthening your bond with your partner. So again, thank you for listening. And this was a narrative model for treating the unique stressors facing same-sex couples. Thank you.